let's just jump right into it. Let's hit the news.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. North and South America, and all the ships and clippers at sea. Let's go to press. Flight.
First piece of news is a piece of very happy news for us personally. A friend of the podcast, a person who comes and has gamed with us several times, Candice Harris, has officially joined the Boardgamegeek team. She's been writing for Boardgamegeek News since January of this year. And a more kindred spirit we could not imagine. When Candice first came over to my office where we do our gaming, she walked into the back room where I have my games there, and the two of us just stood there. And she was just, you can always tell a person by what games do they pull out, right? What games do they take a peek at? And it's
their horoscope. It's their gaming horoscope.
It really is. It really is. And oh my God, Candice knows her stuff. She is a connoisseur in the truest sense of the word. She had she would bring out a game and she would say, "Oh, do you have," like for instance, she saw Friedrich. She said, "Do you have Maria?" And I said, "No, I don't have Maria. I've played it several times, but I just never ended up getting it." And she says, "Oh, well, I can bring it one time and we can play it," and that kind of thing. And it just, a person that her taste is exquisite. It is on the heavier end, and that's something that I'm really happy Boardgamegeek has recognized. They need more voices on the in the deeper end of the pool, and they picked a winner in Candice. Congratulations to Candice Harris. We wish her all the best over there, and we look forward to when the quarantine has been lifted to having her back around our Game Brain table.
Bravo.
Yes. Second up, another piece of great news. There is a reprint going on. 1822, The Railways of Great Britain. Folks, you know that we've been talking about 18XX for a while. You know we're not experts at 18XX, but we are. There's a bunch of us that are really throwing ourselves into it and really, really love it. I would say the only expert among us is Jennifer. And when you ask Jennifer, what is the greatest 18XX game? And she has to have played 40 of them. She said, without reservation and instantly, she said, the greatest 18XX game is 1822, Railways of Great Britain. Now, when she first told me that, I immediately got on eBay and BoardGameGeek and everywhere else and looked for it. And if I wanted to pay $700 for a copy that would be flown in from South Korea, I could have had it. But that was about the only copy that was anywhere available. Well, congratulations. Happy to say that it is it is on Kickstarter on pre-order. As of this date, it's by the time this episode comes out, it'll have about 21 days to go. The goal was $50,000. It's already over $100,000, and you better believe that Jennifer, Maddie, and myself all have a copy ordered for this masterpiece of 18XX. So you know, this is the deep end of 18XX. This is a game, it's kind of forming its own new branch. Some people say that most 18XX games are 1825 variants or 1830 variants or so on and so forth, right? They're variants of one of the main branches. 1822.
More tracks or more stocks, right? That's the kind of...
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. 1822, from what I understand, is so comprehensive and kind of doing all things, kind of doing all of it, that it kind of has created its own branch. It is a long game. This is not one of the shorter games. There are 21 private companies with special powers, 30 minor companies, 10 major companies. It has an auction system, so that is different than other auction systems in these games. So it brings kind of a Eurogame twist into it. It plays from 3 to 7 players. You're going to need to have people that are ready to have their brains stretched. You're going to have people that are ready to jump in with both feet, and you're going to have to set aside the better part of a day to play it. But you should definitely check it out. I will say that they are including as a bonus a medium scenario, which has a length of around 4 hours or so, they say. We'll see what it ends up being. But I backed it. Maddie backed it. Jennifer backed it. If you are curious about 18XX, if you are big into 18XX, how do you not get this new gorgeous printing of 1822?
Is it by any chance offered on any of the virtual sites right now in terms of something if somebody was curious, they could furtherly curious, they could go dip their toes?
I believe, yes, I believe it is. I believe that 18xx.cc, is that the site? I'm trying to remember the names of. There are a couple sites that are very specific to playing 18xx games online. You'll have to look them up yourselves. I don't have it in front of me right now.
Or just listen back to the episode with Jennifer just a few ago. I know it was mentioned there.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that site, it's more like playing a game on a spreadsheet, but it is
18xx, baby.
it is playable. It is playable. Let's just keep the good news coming. We don't have a lot of news, but it's all really, really good. Terraforming Mars, one of my favorite games of all time, is they've decided to give us a little present. They are issuing Terraforming Mars, the big box. Yes. 3D is the way they're going to go with this. They're doing a big box. It's basically going to look like a Milton Bradley game, but you're playing Terraforming Mars. I'm looking at some of the art from it, and it has everything from little forests, a volcano, cities that all look a little different from each other, a mushroom cloud. If you love the game and you wanted to up the components to something cool, you could do a lot worse than checking out Terraforming Mars 3D.
I will say, too, that sometimes the sameness of the color scheme of that game has put me off at times where it's hard to read the board game state a little bit, hard to know exactly where things are resting. So I can imagine a 3D version would help really specify some of these like one-off events. I can see this as being like a gaming advantage.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. I don't have that particular problem myself.
Well, you love flat printout things. I mean, this is well known.
Is that the book on me? I love flat.
I mean, there's some print and play in your background, right? So
I guess. Yeah, I do. I do like simple things. I'm not into. I don't need all the fancy bells and whistles. Miniatures. I guess for me, miniatures still to this day are a little bit of a turn off because I'm like, well, to me, it's it's focus on the surface and not on what the game really is on the inside, right?
Well, I'm so used to fidgeting around with rulers, literally rulers on a Warhammer 40K board or a fantasy battle. Mm-hmm. A lot of my background is in some of that space, and I didn't love the painting of the miniatures, but the specificity to which you would place a miniature down and then you would have to measure from that if you had like line of sight or something. And so sometimes this would be where the rules lawyering came in, maybe somehow, but also it really did change the game. It changed the way you played the game depending on what you were seeing on the board. So
I'm going to date myself, but I used to play a game called Mayday, which was an offshoot of the amazing British role-playing game Traveller. And Traveller was my game. That was it. Everyone else played D&D. I played Traveller. It came out just a couple years after Traveller, one of the very first, after D&D, one of the very first games. And that was it. I love science fiction, and that was my world. And I had a campaign that went for, I want to say 10, 12 years, something like that. It after I left it continued. It was amazing, but it had this starship combat system that was not hex based. It was vector based. So
all the sense. It makes all the sense. Space battles, come on.
It was a realistic space battle thing where you hit the afterburners too much, and suddenly you have a one of those tape measures, and you're measuring out 47 feet to mark where your thing ended up as you're blasting the thrusters the other way to try and slow enough to change your vector to head back the other way. It was crazy, absolutely insane. But yeah, so.
Awesome.
I'm not sure what this has to do with Terraforming Mars 3D anymore, but there we go. There's a new game coming out on Kickstarter, just came out, called Merchants of the Dark Road. This is a game by a guy named Brian Suhr, I think. Suhre is his name. And he hasn't done anything that we have reviewed. I don't think he's done anything that we have played before, but I will say that John Gets Games and Rahdo both have done sort of paid run-throughs of it, and it looks kind of interesting. At least it has some interesting aspects to it. It is a rondel system game, and that gets my interest up immediately. Rondels, for anyone that doesn't know, is a wonderful little system where you have a small circle, and on that circle are the actions that you can take. And on any given turn, you're going to move your pawn around that circle to another space, often with rules that you can move it up to 3 spaces or something like that, so it limits the action selection system. Rondel games tend to have micro actions. When you take one of these actions, they tend to be small, they tend to be quick to operate, and what you're really doing is it keeps the game moving. Everybody is taking these little actions, and what you're trying to do is chain your actions and chain your timing as best you can in the games. In this game, it is set in a sort of fantasy world. We've had a half a year of daylight. Now it's the dark season. The roads are treacherous, but we are merchants. And what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go out there into the world and get objects and sell them at the various back alley sellers or dungeons or at the inns that we pass along the way. We can work together sometimes. We can go out with a little bit of show of force, it looks like. So, it looks kind of cool. It's kind of a dark board, and who knows? It's got dice workers. It's got a rondel, so it's got some of our favorite mechanisms. And watching Rahdo's run through certainly looks like something I want to keep my eye on. I'm not sure I'm gonna leap in and put my hard-earned money down on this right now. But I highly recommend you check out Rahdo's video and decide for yourself. It's certainly worth noting. Next up, we got Through the Ages. Hey, do you guys remember about half a year ago to a year ago when we said that Vlaada Chvátil and CGE were going to come out with a new expansion for Through the Ages? It was called New Leaders and Wonders. And then they released it, and then they immediately stopped releasing it because they found out that they were basically right about to release it, and then they realized there was a huge problem with the cards. The cards for the expansion did not match up with the cards from the original, and that's a problem in Through the Ages, because if you can notice a difference, then you're dead in the water. You know basically what's coming. So they had to scrap that. They released it online, so when you play the game online, you could play with the expansion, and lots of people, I mean, I know our crew, you guys are playing.
I think it's the superior version. I think especially a blended keeps it really fresh and interesting, and some of the new cards are phenomenal. Some of the new leaders are amazing. Change the whole experience.
Well, now that people like to play games with human beings in real life, Alfred, tell us what New Leaders and Wonders gets you. What's the gag to it?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot more playability, a lot more replayability, and just different ways to get to your kind of end goals, right? It's just
right.
that the decision tree changes from just being a Michelangelo strategy the whole time, or Michelangelo? How do you say that? But basically, there was just a few really, really, really powerful leaders that if you were lucky enough to snag, you were in a position where people had to play against you. It just kind of, and not to limit things, I know good players can overcome any difficulty, but I think there were some leaders that were very strong, and I just think with the new additions, there's just more ways to go.
Cool. So
but I've only played it online, so I don't really know.
Is there a Genghis Khan in the new cards? In the sense that Genghis Khan is one of those cards that when that comes into the game and somebody puts him as their leader, it radically changes the way everyone has to play. It's not overpowered because it doesn't mean that somebody's going to win, but it definitely upsets a lot of balances in the game.
And especially because Genghis Khan was one of the earlier leaders. There was always further along leaders that would that were powerful, but what lane you were in. You had to be a kind of a specialist at something, or be mildly. You kind of mildly pivot depending. But early in the game, it was typically that if somebody was Genghis Khan or if someone was Joan of Arc, these really strong leaders, you would have to play against them, right? You would have to like mitigate that immediately, and it would maybe radically change your game just to be in service of defeating the other person, which is, as we all know, is not the most fun gameplay, right? It's not the most fun state when you have to kind of pick, the person who's like dragging on the wind shear of the other person could suddenly jump forward when you're playing against the leader, when you're bopping him in the head. So I would love to be able to specifically tell you some leaders that were kind of change things up. It isn't in front of me right now, but I will say that it seems like there's a lot more now. There's a lot more strategies. And if you do play the blended variety online, you just don't know exactly what's going to come up. It isn't like every time you're going to see all those leaders cycle by.
Sure.
It makes that variability huge too.
I'd love a game that has an expansion that doesn't radically change the game, but adds in just enough of that new card nuance that it changes the meta of the game that you've been playing. And I think even a great game like Through the Ages sometimes your group starts to fall into a bit of a meta. Now, there's so many cards in that game, even without the expansion, that a meta is not always the easiest thing to establish because you're never going to see more than about half of the cards in the game naturally, wouldn't you say?
Well, it felt much more like with the previous version, and you can kind of. I love how you can switch between on the online, where you can switch between the original set, a blended set, or just the new cards.
Right.
So there's already that, but it did feel like you were at least going to see some of these very powerful leaders, and again, depending on your position, you were going to get access to them or not.
Right.
Moses is another one from the early set that people really put a lot of strategy on, and that's really largely now not seen as being as much of a threat.
Oh, great.
But I mean, or at least not as much of a dominant strategy immediately.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, for those of you that play Through the Ages in real life, I know that Trey and Maddie, I think, have said that they're not sure they ever want to play it in real life because they love the app so much and it automates so many things that would be a little bit of a drudge in the real life game. I love the real life game as well. Through the Ages, New Leaders and Wonders should be out now. Prospero Hall appears to have done it again. Back to the Future, Back in Time is a game that is either out right now or about to come out. And it is a 2 to 4 player cooperative game where we are working together to get back in time, right? You can play Marty McFly. You could play Doc Brown. If you're playing 3 players, you could play the girlfriend, Jennifer Parker, famously played by 2 different people over various versions. Or you could play, if you're the 3rd or 4th player, Einstein the dog is a character in the game.
Why not? Right? Why not? Throw it in the mix.
Right? You're going to be moving your characters around Hill Valley. You're going to collect the items needed to fix the DeLorean time machine. You got to deal with Biff Tannen when his card comes up. You have to make sure that Marty's parents fall in love, and then you got to accelerate that DeLorean to 88 miles an hour down Main Street. There is not only a Main Street sort of area, there is a clock tower, dice tower, that you will roll the dice through. I love Prospero Hall. These guys get it. They make these fun, kitschy games that are playable enough, right? That are, they're not super deep, they're not super long, but they get it. They use just enough Eurogame mechanics to make a game that is sound. And their production values are so spot on. I can't wait to get this on the table. I think I'm looking forward to this more than the last couple. They did The Shining. They did a few other things. This is one that just for some reason, looking at the art, looking at it all together, it's just pushing my buy button really, really hard.
And it's more than fan fodder, right? Because I do see that they settle on the sweet spot of like a kind of a retro revisionism. But these games have some meat on their bones, right? I haven't played Jaws. I haven't played some of the ones that people tend to like, but
yeah, I mean, listen, Jaws is astonishing. Not that it's an incredibly deep game. It is a hidden movement, 3 people working against 1 person game. So it is very much like Scotland Yard. It is very much like a lot of those things. It's not as quite as good as those things. But it's not really made to be. It's made to be something that is, we're playing this game, and in playing this game, we're playing Jaws. We're in the movie Jaws. We get to be in the movie Jaws, and the mechanics of the game back up that experience, right? It's not, I don't think it's a game that I can play 100 times, but when I do play it, I have enormous fun recognizing that it's not going to be perfect. It's not something that's super deep or crazy well nuanced, but very well thought out. That's
Is this a gateway game, though? Is this the kind of game, not just Jaws, but like, say, this new one, the rules you've seen, is this the kind of game that we could bring to a table of people who have some interest in the board game space, and are maybe ready to get beyond Catan, or the kind of other gateway games that we're talking about, Wingspan and whatnot, Wingspan being already a little bit on the heavier side for some gamers. But is this the kind of thing where they'll have enough theme to really get them into the headspace, and then maybe we could bring out a game that has,
100%.
Maybe not a dice tower.
100%. No, I absolutely think so. I mean, I've played Jaws many times with non-gamers. They get it. They get into it. And when they're done, they have an understanding a little bit. They don't recognize that they have that understanding, but I could graduate them to several other games that are just a little bit heavier, and they would jump right into it because they only need to learn 1 or 2 new things. They've been given a little bit of a Eurogame vocabulary to some degree. This one looks like it is a cooperative game to some degree. So I think this one looks a little lighter. I think this one looks like it may have less to be less of a bridge to Eurogaming, because I think it may be more firmly in the world of non-Euro, more traditional gaming. But I don't know. I mean, Top Gun seemed kind of more traditional, but I thought that turned out pretty well too. So these guys are doing a great job.
Yeah, anything that can put these words into people's mouths about and get rid of that kind of fear people have when they start hearing worker placement or terms that are so specific to the board game space. That's a gift.
100%. Totally agree. And then one more thing I want to bring up. Every once in a while, I'll bring up a role-playing game thing. I know this is a board game channel, but I do think that that you guys should know about this. There is a very interesting game that is on Kickstarter right now. It is called Alice is Missing. Alice is Missing it's going to have about 19 days to go when this episode comes out. It had a goal of $10,000. It's currently racked up $50,000 some odd dollars. So it is fully kicked. Here is the idea. The idea is this is a immersive storytelling RPG in which the players cannot talk to each other. The players are only going to communicate to each other by sending text messages back and forth to each other. So it's a 90-minute play session. You are sending emails back and forth. There's a deck of cards, and as as cards from the deck are drawn, each person has a certain piece of information that the other people don't have, and they're texting back and forth. There is suspicion. You don't know who you can trust. You have, your relationships to Alice, and you have ties to the other characters, and you're uncovering secrets, unearthing clues, and you're trying to discover where Alice is and who is behind her disappearance. It looks fantastic. Each player is going to record a secret voicemail that's going to be played at the end of the game, which is kind of the denouement. It kind of lets you know how you did at the end. It even has they even have a I think, is it a stretch goal? I'm trying to figure out if it's a stretch goal. They have a soundtrack. They have
nice.
I think a Spotify soundtrack that acts as the game timer. And it is licensed music featuring artists such as Message to Bears, This Patch of Sky, Justin LaPointe, and Be Still the Earth. I don't know any of these artists.
I have a feeling that they're probably either people involved in the space or or fans of the space. But what an awesome implementation. And to me, although this sounds role-playing-ish, I mean, it sounds like some freedom to play, this is not dissimilar from an Avalon or from other games. We've talked about other games with like pre-recorded soundtracks. Captain Sonar has some timer aspects. These kind of games were either in cooperative or antagonistic hidden traitor kind of mechanisms and mechanics. This sounds like it has every kind of impulse to be part of that board game space, at least in that regard. I can't say about the hard and fast rules of winners and losers, but goodness gracious, that sounds fun. Or Blood in the Clock Tower, right? I mean, that's like you're doing a lot of role-playing aspects with just a little bit of board game space and super simple.
Yeah, what I love about it is I find limits on communication to be an amazing thing in role playing and in game playing. I mean, did you ever play Space Alert with me, Alfred?
Yes, I don't know. Well, I did play it. I don't remember exactly when and how. But I definitely that game has come up.
It has a soundtrack to it, right? And certain times on the soundtrack, you hear this hissing and this static. When you hear that static, you're not allowed to talk, and everyone still has to. The timer's still going. You still have to plan your moves. You still have to do what you're doing, and you're on a radio silence because there's somebody is jamming the aliens.
Cosmic rays or something, right?
Yeah, they're jamming the communications, and every time that would happen, I would laugh out loud. It was so wonderful and immediately immersive. I always think that experience is really kind of cool. And actually, when you think about it, that's what Avalon is, right? If you are a Percival, you know something, but who can you tell? How can you tell? What can you do, right? And all that sort of stuff.
Well, and I love the use of the technology to get around those limitations rather than have everything be above the board. Just totally eliminate the impulse to say something and maybe give something away. It's wonderful. That's great.
Completely. And I believe it is very well designed for online play in the current situation that we're in. I think 4 or 5 people in totally different parts of the world probably, I believe, I need to look into it a little bit more, but I believe people could play this. Yeah, I think they can play it on Roll-D20 and do the whole thing online and just be texting with each other as you're playing this game. I would love to do it. There have been a couple games in the past in the indie role playing game space. There was a caveman one, I think, called Primitive, which was interesting in that part of the design of the game is pre-language. You are encountering the other players, and you do not have a tribe yet, so you don't have any common language. So the entire game is played in which you have to communicate without ever using words. So you can use gestures, you can make motions, you can start to create your own language as you go, and I found that to be fascinating.
Isn't there a GURPS Prehistoric as well?
There's a GURPS everything, so I'm going to say yes.
Yes, there is a GURPS everything.
Yeah, and I never played that. I tend, as you well know, I tend to be much more versed in the indie RPG space. That was that's my dojo, So I do believe that there has been a game or two designed around the deaf community that uses ASL and things like that, and possibly even to help teach people that are non-conversant to teach them some ASL. I believe I'm recalling something from memory, and so don't quote me on this, but there's a lot of interesting things. Check out Alice is Missing on Kickstarter. You might just be amazed if it's interesting to you. That's it for game news.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.